What was the condition of agriculture in Russia during the Russian Revolution? Approximately 90% of the Russian population was engaged in agriculture, yet Russia was backward in the agricultural sector. What was the condition of the peasants in Russia in the 20th century? Most peasants were serfs who worked on the lands of large farmers to make a living. They did not have any personal freedom. How did the aristocratic class of Russia live in the 20th century? The aristocratic class included big landlords and priests. They had control over 1/5 of the country's land and lived a life of prosperity and luxury. Who was the ruler of Russia during the Russian Revolution, and which dynasty did he belong to? The ruler of Russia during the 1917 Russian Revolution was Tsar Nicholas II. He belonged to the Romanov dynasty. Name 4 famous writers who contributed to the 1917 Russian Revolution. The 4 famous writers were Tolstoy, Turgenev, Dostoevsky, and Gorky. Who was Rasputin? Rasputin was a resident of Siberia. He called himself a saint but was a fraud. He had a great influence on Tsar Nicholas and his wife. What kind of rule did the Tsars of Russia have? The Tsars of Russia were absolute rulers. They believed in the divine rights of the king and held all powers of governance. Every word spoken by them was considered law. Which ruler of Russia adopted the policy of reactionism, suppression, and Russification? Tsar Alexander III adopted these policies and ruled Russia from 1881 to 1894 AD. When and what day is called Bloody Sunday in Russian history? January 22, 1905 is called Bloody Sunday in Russian history. On this day, the soldiers of Tsar Nicholas II fired upon a procession of workers, killing thousands. List 4 causes of the Russian Revolution. The 4 causes were the absolute rule of the Tsars, incompetent governance, the miserable condition of the peasants, and the dissatisfaction of the workers. Who was Tsarina? Tsarina was the queen of Tsar Nicholas II. She was from Germany and did not have any real love for the Russian people. She was a woman of staunch reactionary views. Why was there dissatisfaction among the workers in Russia in the 20th century? The condition of the workers was very pitiful. They had to work 15 to 20 hours a day and were paid very low wages. This led to dissatisfaction among them. What was the immediate cause of the 1917 Russian Revolution? Russia's defeat in the First World War and the shortage of essential goods in Russia became the immediate cause of the Russian Revolution. What was the meaning of nihilism? The word nihilism comes from nihil, which means nothing. Its proponents believed that everything should be tested on the touchstone of reason and should not be believed blindly. Briefly note on the nihilism movement in Russia. Reactionary actions during the reign of Tsar Alexander II gave birth to the nihilism movement, which aimed to end the old administrative rule in Russia. Although suppressed by the government, this movement later became a cause of the Russian Revolution. When did the first explosion of the Russian Revolution happen? The first explosion of the Russian Revolution happened on March 7, 1917, when poor peasants and workers protested in Petrograd, looting shops. The Russian army also joined them, marking the start of the revolution. Name the 2 factions of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party. The 2 factions were the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. The Bolshevik faction had a majority, while the Menshevik faction had a minority. Who were the Bolsheviks? What do you know about them? The majority faction of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party was called the Bolsheviks. This faction was led by Lenin. Who were the Mensheviks? The minority faction of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party was called the Mensheviks. Name the leaders of the Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks. The leader of the Menshevik faction was Kerensky, and the leader of the Bolshevik faction was Lenin. Which event is called the February Revolution? The fall of the Tsar is called the February Revolution. Tsar Nicholas II abdicated his throne on March 15, 1917, which, according to the old Russian calendar, was February 27, 1917. Hence it is called the February Revolution. In which year and month was the last Tsar of Russia shot? The last Tsar of Russia and his wife were shot on July 16, 1918. Who was the leader of the Bolshevik movement, and when did he become the Prime Minister of Russia? The leader was Lenin. He became the Prime Minister of Russia on November 8, 1917. What was the real name of Lenin? Lenin's real name was Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov. Name the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of the new Bolshevik government after the 1917 Russian Revolution. Lenin was the Prime Minister, and Trotsky was the Foreign Minister of the new Bolshevik government. What is meant by the October Revolution? The 1917 Russian Revolution is also called the October Revolution Because, according to the old Russian calendar, the revolution of November 1917 occurred on October 25, 1917. Who formed the Red Army in Russia? Lenin formed the Red Army in Russia. What is meant by Cheka? What was Lenin's objective in forming it? Cheka means revolutionary court. Lenin's objective was to suppress his opponents. What were the causes of the success of the Russian Revolution? The causes included the leadership of competent leaders and the support given to the movement by millions of workers. What were the main effects of the 1917 Russian Revolution? The absolute rule of the Tsars ended. Socialism was established, the condition of peasants improved, and laws were made for the welfare of the workers. What was the effect of the Russian Revolution on the peasants? Before the revolution, the peasants were in a deplorable condition, with little land and heavily in debt. The revolution offered them a ray of hope. What was the effect of the Russian Revolution on the workers? Before the revolution, workers labored for 15 to 20 hours a day in terrible conditions. As a result of the revolution, numerous laws were created for their welfare, improving their situation. Why is the Russian Revolution considered a major event in world history? It is considered a major event because it led to the establishment of the dominance of socialism.